$419 Pyramid. What's the point? And is it any good? AZZA. They're an interesting company. They make some very interesting cases. For instance, the AZZA Cast, the AZZA Legionnaire, and now the AZZA Pyramid. Now, there's actually 4 different versions of the AZZA Pyramid, and most of them are tempered glass, except this one, which is the one that we actually got a hold of. And this is like the mesh version of the AZZA Pyramid. You know, which I just realized. Let's go ahead and turn it on, right? Because that's, yeah, there we go. This case is actually pretty large when you really think about it. Like, when I first saw it and they said they were gonna send it to me, I didn't think it was as big as it actually is. It's 490 millimeters base and width, and then it's 585 millimeters high, or about 23.03 inches tall. At empty, it weighs 31.1 pounds, or a little bit over 14.1 kilograms. And it's not cheap, by the way, either. $380 all the way up to $420. But this is the mesh airflow version. All of the other ones you really couldn't air cool, but on this one you can air cool. So let's open this up for the rest of the review, because that's gonna be way easier. By the way, like the whole pyramid thing, like it also doubles as a mask, so that is also an option here for you as well. Okay, well, let's put the toy away, Robey. Right here, you can see that it's actually got the Noctua U12A, and it can fit up to 95 millimeters in height. But you can see that you have to be very, very careful here from the side, because from the side here, this barely fits, right? So there's a lot to consider when you think about putting parts in this case. Okay, for motherboard support, you can support up to an eATX, which means you can do mini ITX, micro ATX, all that sort of stuff. It actually has a lot of room here on the base for motherboard. For fans, you can do 140 or 120 millimeter at the top. This AZZA fan, by the way, is actually very, very powerful. So at the bottom, you can actually do 5 120 millimeter fans. Now for radiators, you could do 120 millimeter at the top, but I don't actually know how good that would be. I mean, you could do it down there, I guess, if you wanted to, but I feel like then you're losing airflow from the top, but it is an option. You can also do a 360 millimeter AIO at the bottom, but I'll be honest, guys, when we looked at this, when we were building this live on the stream, we're really worried about the how much air is going to be restricted down here. Now, we obviously didn't test it because this is an airflow build, and we wanted to test it with an air cooler. That was the whole point of this case, but you could technically do a 360. In the other versions of the AZZA Pyramid, this is actually a bit higher, which restricts GPU height, but it does actually provide more airflow, so the AIO gets better air. And if you want to, you can watch our entire full stream of the whole build right here. Now, GPU is unique. It mounts horizontally, but above the motherboard. So it actually comes with a riser cable, and then this support bracket that then supports the GPU in this case. For size, you can do 330 millimeters by 150 millimeters by 70 millimeters, which is actually a pretty big GPU. In fact, when we looked at the measurements, the length, width, and height of the 4090 would technically fit in here, but because of how fat and how high above the IO plate this went, it actually wouldn't clear the IO shield of the motherboard, and it basically conflicted with the top of the cooler. So again, even though you have those numbers, it's not entirely telling of how much actually fits within the case. Now, for your PSU, which is very unique, it's actually hidden underneath. That's one of the things they did with this particular Rev. So there's like a false floor that drops below, and that's where your PSU fits. And you've actually got quite a bit of room for your PSU. Now understand, for cable management, just because of how this case is, you have to think about think about everything you put inside of it. And this is really kind of all the place you have to store and hide all your cables below. Anyway, that's everything you could put inside of it, but let's go ahead and put a build in it, which I know you're looking at right here, but let's give you some sexy B-roll and really kind of show this off so you can see it from a bunch of different angles. So I want to talk a little bit about this thing, this whole case and how this whole build came together, because I wanted to think of something unique to do when we actually do like a case like this. So we actually made it a user choice case, and people got to vote, and you should go watch the stream, and I pointed it to you earlier. People got to vote everything that we put inside of this case. Now, I did make recommendations. Like I did say things like, you guys, we should probably air cool it. We should probably, not AIO cool it. Now, people could vote against me, and in some cases they did. But for the most part, this was actually completely chosen from the community. Everything from the RAM, the type of RAM, the GPU that was put in it, which we actually in the end weren't able to fit, CPU, platform, all that sort of stuff was all chosen. The only thing they weren't allowed to choose was obviously the dark power, because at the time we thought we were going to put in a 4090 and we wanted to have an ATX 3.0 power supply and celebrate the fact that Be Quiet sent us something that was completely unreleased. So very cool. Now let's see, how did users do with the components we put together? So specs inside of this bad boy, we have a Ryzen 7 5800X 3D. Noctua NH-U12A is the cooler, which barely fits, about as big as you're going to get, so don't think you're, no D15 dreams. You got your Asus RG Strix X570E. You got 32 gigs of 4000 megahertz G.Skill Triton Z RGB, which we have in white, and actually I think it looks pretty sick. Got a 2 terabyte Seagate FireCuda 530, of which they got to choose from a numerous different ones. It was supposed to be a 4090 FE. I talked a little bit before about that clearance issue here at the top. So we basically had to put in a 3080. This is the best one that we had in there, which is why we're not gonna bother with gaming things, because this wasn't ideally the build that you guys wanted to build. And then for our power supply, we had the Be Quiet 1000 watt Dark Power Pro ATX 3.0, which is unreleased, but we definitely are a huge shout out to Be Quiet for letting us show this off. And we're gonna have this in a couple builds over the next couple months. Very impressed with the build that the community put together. I think I would love to see this exact same build with the 5800X 3D, with the rumored or even rumored 7600X 3D or 7800X 3D with a 7900X or 7900 XTX. Okay, so let's talk about the build experience here for this thing. It is very premium. Like the case itself is very premium, and you feel that. I mean, the materials are high quality. It's, this is not cheaply or chinsily made. But the one thing I will say, because of the unique nature of the case, you are immediately going to have a ton of issues because of that. PSU and hiding all the cables just flat out is a pain. You can see everything because of the mesh. It's all very visible. So this little IO shield comes up and you can stick a bunch of cables in here. I installed the PSU first because I thought it would be easier, because you have access to it. It's a lot easier. You didn't want to have a case and moving things around. But in the end, you had to, I spent a lot of time rerouting cables off of the side to try and find the right way to get them into my motherboard. You could try doing it the opposite way and basically install all of your components first and then put in your PSU. The false floor makes that a little bit easier, but I'll tell you, it's awkward trying to like lean this thing down and putting it in the right direction, especially if you lean it towards the back, because the IO shield actually sticks out, so you can only lean it 3 ways to be able to get access to it. The cables they gave you for both RGB and the fans are too short. Like this, they're actually ideally placed right here, but even then, I still need to do cable extensions. And the sad thing is like it's the bulkiest part of the cables is right here. Luckily, that it gets covered, but I had to do a whole lot of like hiding here to hide the bulk of those cables because of the nature of it. And then just the unique nature of this GPU thing. There's just a lot that you're gonna have to do trial and error to kind of figure the whole thing out. Now, we are actually air cooling, which is what we wanted to do. So the question was, if we're air cooling, then Robey, how did it actually perform when air cooling? So at idle, our CPU, both in open and closed case, we're sitting at 41 degrees, which is actually great. Now, we did have some theories, just given the size of the holes and stuff like that on the mesh, on whether we were gonna see a huge variance between open and closed case, but we actually didn't. So when we put the CPU under load, doing our usual round of testing, which in this case is Cinebench, we saw things jump up to 85 in the closed case and only 84 in the open case. So a 1 degree difference between having the top on and having the top off. And I think with this combination, you could do anything near like a 12700K, a 5800X, etc. would work in this case if you wanted to get crazy and just wanted to have like a piece of art build on your desk. So what about GPU then, Robey? Well, GPU at idle, in the open case, we saw 44, and closed, we saw 45. And the thing that was super interesting that Kevin actually noticed when he was doing his testing on this, when the GPU was at idle, when we were doing our CPU load testing, the temperature of the GPU dropped because this thing is pulling in enough air to actually drop the temp of the GPU. So I think that actually having an air cooler in this build actually does also help improve the GPU temps as well, because it is pulling in additional air to keep it down. Under load, we saw things both in open and closed at 75. That's at the worst case. For gaming, you're gonna sit in the low 70s, high 60s. There's not gonna be any issue. I hate that people get mired in this stuff for the most part. If you're sitting in the mid 80s when we're doing things under the absolute worst load, then you're gonna be fine for most of the stuff that you're gonna do. Okay, so what are my closing thoughts? The AZZA Pyramid, Robey, what do you think? It's pricey. I mean, it's freaking not cheap, but it's an effective air-cooled case. For the most part, this is gonna be either you love it or you hate it. Grab this thing here and pop it back on. Not everybody's gonna be into having a giant triangle pyramid sitting on their desk. I mean, you gotta be into this. And the other two is you gotta be really honest. You're really limited on the hardware that you can put inside of the case. I mean, from an air cooling perspective, there's already not a ton of the high-end CPUs you can do with that right now, just given how warm 13th gen and 7000 series Radeon are. You could definitely do older stuff. And then again, you're limited in terms of you're either gonna do a high-end AMD GPU or you're gonna do a high-ish end 3000 series NVIDIA GPU, but your 4000 series is out the door until we see what the 4070 and all that sort of stuff is. You guys put together a great build inside of this. It was a pleasure to absolutely test. It is a very unique looking build, and I love in the end, how it looks. Would I put it on my desk? I don't know, for 400 bucks, I'm not sure, right? That's gonna be completely up to you. But speaking of being up to you, I would love to know your thoughts on this build. What do you think of the AZZA Pyramid case? I mean, were you surprised at some of our results? And do you think that our community did a pretty good job of choosing the components? Remember, it's supposed to be a 4090, but in the end, it wasn't able to fit just because of the top end. But yeah, let me know your thoughts and your ideas down in the comments below. Now, while you're down there, make sure you slap that subscribe button, whip that like button, and ring that notification bell so you get a notification we do other things like this. And also, if you'd love to be part of our user choice build next time, join us over at youtube.com/Robeytech Live, where we do live builds like this all the time, and you make your voice known. Or you can follow us also at twitch.tv/Robeytech. We stream to both of those locations. You want to further this or have questions about a build or want to do a build like this, and you should head over to our Discord server, discord.gg/Robeytech, where we have tons of like-minded PC enthusiasts that love to talk about things like this, nerd out on it, nerd out on the builds, and help you choose something and make something absolutely awesome. Also, you should check us out at Robeytech absolutely everywhere. We're on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We do awesome TikTok trends like this one, or show off super fire builds like this over on Instagram. Anyway, guys, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.